Hey, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to Planetzoo. We're not in Wildlands this week. In fact, this week I thought I would pop together a quick video just of something I've been doing in the background. That is mainly based around putting together a couple of modular backstages, which I'm going to hopefully use in a few future projects. And I thought I'd throw it out to the people on Discord, see what they thought and see what sort of enclosures and what backstage habitats they mostly don't do. And the two highest contenders were Hoofstock and Aquatics. So today we're going to do one for each, and I'm going to pop it up on the workshop at the end of the video. However, if you can think of any other well-deserving types of animals that need a more specialist backstage area, pop it down in the comments below and I will happily make them and throw them up on the workshop. Might even get another video out of it, who knows. Now the idea here is that these can just literally be placed into a zoo, and then you can build your own enclosure around the outside of them. And we're starting off with the Hoofstock one, where I found a really nice open backstage reference photo of a Hoofstock habitat that had these wonderful little wooden plank fences. So I've recreated those. I'm going to make a metal frame around the top, and that's just so that we can add on some various protection, such as a hot wire running along the top there, just in case you happen to put in a particularly taller Hoofstock animal. This probably won't be that suitable for, say, a giraffe, but it will work for the okapi or tapirs, etc. Now, I'm not going to go too overboard with the detailing on this, purely because I don't want to completely blow the piece count of everyone's creations. And let's face it, backstage areas are never the main area where you would have your focus. However, this just gives you something nice you can just plop in there and have as an extra addition to your habitat. So there we go. In the background there, we're going to run the hot wire along the top, and with the fence pretty much finished, we're going to turn our focus to the inside of the enclosure. Now, lately I have been using these painted temple pieces as curbs, and they've been working out really well. So we're going to run them along the front of the fence just to stop anything inside the habitat leaking out. And then where we have gaps for the gates, we're going to have some vents just so that we've got a good bit of drainage, and that should keep the outside area nice and clean. Now, this setup is very much designed around having a staff area on the other side of the fence. However, there is absolutely no reason why you couldn't take out all the staff equipment on that side and make a walk-through indoor habitat for your Hoofstock, and this might make a little nice addition for that. I'm also going to set it up so that there are gates that can be pulled across, and that would just basically allow you to separate it into two separate areas. Certainly if you are, say, keeping a male and a female separate from each other, then this habitat would also work for that. You may just have to put more than one exit on the outside so they can get into each area. Using these wheels as little bumpers, by the way, was something I just thought of doing, and I love it, and I have to use it in everything now. So when we jump back into Wildlands, you'll probably see them popping up quite a bit. Now, I really did want to get away from just using the European marquee beam for everything, and it's only when you start building things like this you really sort of see just how restrictive some of the metal construction pieces really are. We really only have the painted metal beams and metal rods, and then the sort of one-off metal items like the cast iron fence or the marquee beam. However, I think we've got a good mix of painted metal and raw metal going on. I've used the girders there just to give ourselves a bit of structure, and they could be easily unpainted, but they could easily also be decorated to suit your habitat. So a lot of this, or at least as much of this habitat as possible, is flexicolour for that reason. Now that the inside of the habitat is done, we're going to focus on the staff area. I'm using our wonderful scale model here just to inform our heights and sizes, and we've made a couple of faux shelves, and these are quite thin, but they'd only really store bits of food. And then we're also going to knock together a sink area, which we're going to build a cupboard underneath, and then just to extend it out, we're going to bring in a wonderful stainless steel countertop. Now you'll have probably noticed by now that I am a big fan of these aluminium pieces as well. They are absolutely perfect for countertops, but they also rotate round and connect together quite nicely. So we're going to use them for backsplashes as well as other shelving covering in other parts of the habitat. Keep your eye out in the cinematics and you'll see them scattered everywhere, but they are one of those really good pieces. Now pretty much all of the connections in the habitat here, so things like the water pipes and the electrical cables, are going to run up into a ceiling. So if you do happen to put them in a habitat that doesn't have a ceiling, you may want to just rotate those around and run them into the wall. But as a general rule, if you put a roof on at the height of these walls, then pretty much everything will look complete. Now as we round off our staff area, I then decided let's put a little bit of enrichment in there. So we're going to create a electrically ran feeding winch or a feeding line, and this is basically using a cable running from the staff area into the habitat, and that's going to have one of these mechanical pulleys on it with a knot at the end, and then on one of them I've just stuck a couple of bits of maize into just to make it look a little bit more like it's actually in use. If you don't like the maize, or if the maize doesn't quite work for you, feel free to swap these out for other plants. I did have a look around, but I couldn't quite see something that dragged my eye. And then just to finish off, we're going to go over everything with a couple of decals and just really messy it all up. The inside of this habitat, while it would be hosed down and brushed off, it's going to get stained, it's going to get marked, and some of that's going to get pulled out. And how much decals you then keep in your habitat is entirely up to you. Realistically though, let's face it, it's Planetzoo and everything's going to have decals on it because they are one of the few things that is absolute must for every habitat. Then just to fill in a couple of blank areas on the walls, I've knocked together very quickly this hay bale feeder, popped a couple bits of grass in there so it's a little bit more threadbare, and with that we are done. And just so you can get an idea of how it would work in a real life zoo, I've popped together a quick surrounding wall and ceiling for you, popped a couple of mid-size antelope in. As you can see, these are not necessarily big enough to need that hot wire, but they still work in great scale with that fence. Completely traversable, no areas that they're getting tripped up on, which is great, and it will fit a sizable amount of animals in here before it starts to look a little bit too small. Now before we move on to the second habitat, I did also at the same time have a little bit of inspiration hit me, and I made up a collection of fences that I'm going to use a lot for my backstages based on Chester Zoo, and that's these here. So I'm going to pop these also on the workshop for those of you that are interested. These are just normal fences, a couple of more basic metal ones as well as large scale elephant and hippo style bar ones. Okay, moving on to habitat number 2, or backstage number 2 I should say, for the aquatic animals. Now I did try to keep this as generic as possible, however it does not fit a full size saltwater crocodile. Someone pointed that out to me on Discord. Unfortunately I was not aware of the significantly huge box that goes around a male saltwater crocodile. However, just about every other aquatic reptilian will fit, as does most of the other aquatic animals, and I think this is a good start as a generic backstage area for them. However, again, if you would like a larger one, or if there is a specific animal, let me know down below. Now as we're past halfway through the video point here, and since we didn't do it at the start, I feel now is a great place to just a little request from myself. If you are enjoying this video, please make sure to tap the like button down below. It really helps the video get shown to more people, and I'd like to think that we've provided a good bit of value for you to make clicking that button worthwhile. Thank you. Okay, so we've marked out our backstage area now with those temple pieces, again using them as curbs, and we've popped a couple of drains around them. And before we put water in, I just want to get all of the decals and the mud and the dirt in the bottom of the pool here down, because it's much easier than when we have the water in. Those vents that we've popped in will also be popping a bubble animation into later on. You'll see that in the cinematics. And then just to round them off, we're going to bring in some pipes. They'll connect up to the filters and we'll run them further through the habitat in a little while. Again, a bit like the previous one, we're going to use these girders just to sort of dictate where doors could go. So you don't have to use these girders, you don't have to put doors into them, but they're kind of there to say, hey, this is a great place for a door. Moving on to the fencing, I'm not going to show you the whole thing just because, let's face it, a fence is a fence. It's a basic metal square, but we are going to use some of these cables this time just to give ourselves a little bit more detailing, and these are a little bit thinner so they kind of work well with the mesh. Because this is likely to have carnivores and carnivores with sharp mouths, we are going to use mesh this time as opposed to bars. I'm just going to trim out where that mesh meets the metal with these grasslands poles, as that gets rid of that weird fuzzy texture that can sometimes occur. Now with that fence complete, we can start dragging it around all the way around. I'm going to use this door just as a stand-in for the habitat gate. So this backstage area is designed to have a habitat gate placed within it. And then on the inside, we're just going to put in a couple more gates just so that each area could be separated off if you were keeping more than one animal, or if you needed to segregate them whilst you were cleaning out the habitat. With all the fencing complete, we're now going to go through and run our filtration pipes, and these are just going to run along the roof line and around to one of the walls. And again, when you come to put this into a zoo, if you just make sure that a wall meets up with the end of the pipe, it will look perfectly fine. We're going to create these little ceiling hangers, and I've put in a temporary ceiling just to make sure we get these at the right height. And then with those complete, we're going to move on to the staff tools and work area. We're going to copy across our sink, but we're going to duplicate it up, flip it round and give them a double sink. We are dealing with wet animals nonetheless. And we also have a little bit more space in this one. So this one's quite a bit of a bigger backstage area. Then once we have the sink in, I'm going to bring across some of the shelves. I'm just going to make a little setup of a wheelbarrow and a shovel. I don't want to put too much in the backstage here because I think depending on what animal you use will depend on what sort of decoration stuff you want in your backstage. And I think this is a very easy way of making backstage areas look really good is by twisting them and changing them to fit the animal that's in, rather than just using this generic backstage area on its own. Use it as a starting point for adding your own little twist. And with that, we're pretty much complete. I'm not going to pop a roof on for this one just because it was a bit of a pain trying to get all the lights lined up. But essentially, as you can see here, it works brilliantly for the spectacle caiman, even if it doesn't fit the saltwater crocodile. They get full access all the way around, and there's plenty of room to put in bedding and enrichment items. And it's not just the reptiles, you could also bring in many of our aquatic birds, much like our penguins here. They fit great as well. And with that, that about concludes today's video. Hope you enjoyed. If you did, tippy tap the like button. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you next time. Bye guys.